How to Start a Global Startup from Qatar. Thank you for being here. My name is Hanan Al-Basha. I'm one of the co-directors of Founder Institute Qatar. On the call, and our producer for the night, Katie Mapundera, co-director for Founder Institute Qatar. For just so we know, we're going to be doing a very brief presentation, not presentation, just kind of let you know about what Founder Institute is all about. If you haven't heard of us before, we're going to be asking our speakers to give their introductions and tell us about who they are and what they're working on. And then we're going to have a panel discussion talking about the elements of how to build a global startup from Qatar. And we're going to have approximately 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you're here and if you have any questions, please start putting them in the Q&A tab. For those who would like to stick around at the end, we're going to be inviting you to the stage, and we're going to kind of have a quick networking, 10 minutes or something, 10 to 15 minutes. So Founder Institute has started since 2009 out of Silicon Valley. And the whole point of it was to enable and empower startups, or founders actually, at the idea stage and the traction stage, to build fundable startups. At this point in time, it is the world's largest pre-seed accelerator program. The core program of Founder Institute runs 14 weeks, and that's the chapter that we have in Qatar. So it is currently in over 95 countries, over 200 cities, has a huge pool of mentors of over 35,000 mentors from around the world. And that's why global startups is something we're very passionate about, because we believe that there is the opportunity for that across the globe. Over 6,000 portfolio companies have graduated from Founder Institute core program at the current valuation of over $35 billion. The belief is that their founders could have, and entrepreneurs could have, real impact on the society. And that's why the tech-based, tech-enabled founders and ideas that go through the program are usually in alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is something that we're really passionate about as well. And the whole point is to take them from the idea or traction into build global startups. Hence, the program is structured to support that and to support that growth. So the vision, the unicorn vision, not necessarily the billion-dollar valuation, but just the vision of building the future. And that is 10,000 startups and 1,000 venture funds in 5 years. The point is not only of Founder Institute is not only to empower the founders and the entrepreneurs in the multiple cities, but also, more importantly, to empower the leaders within it. And that's why the co-directors and the chapters are built up. So that enables and kind of empowers the entrepreneurial ecosystems in these cities. Then the entrepreneurs go through the core program and the VC lab, and also to support them in creating venture funds. And that's where the VC lab comes in. And then there is the support for lifetime for anyone that goes through the program. So this is the vision of Founder Institute and what it's all about. Just so you know, for those interested, our Qatar chapter, we will be running our next cohort, and that will be cohort number 3, if I'm not mistaken, from October 4th until January 31st. Of course, there's the Christmas Eid break in the middle, Christmas New Year break in the middle. And to check us out, please go to fi.co/apply/Qatar. So today we are talking about how to build a global startup. And we have a panel that is just amazing in what they do and their expertise. And we can't wait to tap into their vision of how they were able to create something or to support the ecosystem. So we have, and thank you, first of all, for being here. Wissam Khostandi is the founder and managing director of Informatica Qatar, and I hope I didn't butcher that. Diala Dawood is the co-founder of Launch DXB, and she's also part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Qatar as part of Tasmo Accelerator. And Hisham Al-Fishawi is the founder and CEO of At Home Doc. So let's get out of that, and here we get to start sharing the story. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists, please, to introduce themselves and to tell us a bit about what they're doing at this point in time in a couple of minutes each, and then we can start the discussion. Ladies first. So I'm going to ask Diala to go first, please.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm joining from Blue Devices because technology failed me today. I'm Diala Dawood. I am the co-founder of Launchly XV, which is a platform supporting early stage founders and entrepreneurs. It's based out of the UAE. And after working for years in the UAE market, then helping startups expand to the Saudi market, I'm currently here based in Qatar, helping drive Tesmo Accelerator, which is a leading smart city accelerator, helping empower and drive digital transformation in Qatar in general. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invite, Dr. Hanan.
Thank you so much, Diala. Wissam, would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself? And
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. So, thank you. You also gave me a nice brief introduction. I came out to Qatar in 2008 from San Francisco to start Informatica Qatar IQ. We've grown it in the country, and from there I've spun out different entities out of it. My latest one now is Emma Systems, focuses on the aviation industry. Actually, I'm currently back in San Francisco for a plug and play program. So good morning to everyone on the West Coast then.
Thank you for being with us so early in the morning. And I know that's not your first meeting, but again, thank you for making the time. Thank you, Sam. Hisham, would you like to tell us a bit about your venture, please?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me for this panel discussion. My name is Hisham El Fishawi. I'm one of the founders and the CEO of At Home Doc. By profession, I'm a telecom engineer who's been in the telecom industry for 6 months after graduation. And every 5 years, I've been doing something different. Ended up in Qatar 17 years ago, started At Home Doc about 6 or 7 years ago. And here we are today.
Interesting. I'm going to be interested to dive a bit deeper into that. But before we dive into any of the ventures and talking about global startups, I want to start with the definition. So Diala, on your end, and again, working from the accelerator and working from the ecosystem perspective, how would you define a global startup?
So for any entrepreneur actually, or for any person venturing forward in the entrepreneurship space, you have to learn that you will always be bombarded with the term you have to scale up and actually being a global startup yourself. Not a single incubator or accelerator or even a mentor would advise you to actually just service one specific geography or one specific market. They will all want you to start from one, focus on one super niche market, but then you have to actually expect yourself and your operations to expand way beyond it and way forward throughout your journey altogether. So for me, a global startup is actually a borderless one, which has a clear identity, a clear starting point, but one that's actually also fluid enough somehow to expand to new markets and to succeed in these new markets altogether. So
I like that. I like the boundless one. That's the boundless part is very important in the definition. Wissam, would you agree with the same definition, or do you see add-ons to that?
I agree. I mean, she hit us spot on. So a global startup operates globally, obviously, and sometimes it's tricky to start one from a very niche and small market. So, the question you need to ask yourself is, how can I develop a product, service, idea that actually crosses boundaries and can target the, maximize your total accessible markets at the same time when you're the ideation stage.
And I like that because both of you, between you and Hisham, one is very niche in terms of what you do as an Informatica, and Hisham's concept as At Home Doc, it's a lot more broadband. You're talking about doctors and accessibility of doctors to people at home. So Hisham, from that perspective, what supported you, or what was part of your decision making when you're like, okay, we started in Qatar and let's go to the next country? Because you're in 3 countries at least right now, right?
Yes, true. At the beginning, yes, going back to what Diala has mentioned and Hussam, I think having the mindset of being a global startup starts by being local. And if you're not local enough, and if you're lacking the ability to localize wherever you operate, then eventually you're not going to succeed, because believe it or not, two adjacent markets could have extreme different dynamics, extreme different customer behavior, knowledge, culture. So adapting to each country is a must, and localizing your product is a must, despite the fact that we all need doctors, but at the end, each market has its own niche, and each market has its own regulatory constraints and market acceptance. A lot of factors affecting your penetration strategy. If you're talking about a go-to market strategy in Qatar, might be different than Saudi Arabia and might be different than Egypt. So starting in Qatar, we've worked a lot to localize, and we learned this over the time. We did not decide to localize from day one, because our approach was the home doctor is part of the national Australian systems, where after hours, any Australian citizen can request a doctor to their home. We had in mind that this would be challenging, and knowing that we're working in the GCC, for example, we were anticipating that we would have some sort of resistance from local community, especially that we have male doctors. At that time, we didn't have any female doctors, and we just found out that we had a niche market in the expat. The foreigners were the first early adopters, and then later on, we started boarding people from the local community, and the local people understanding their mindset more and adapting to their needs. So going back to the discussion, I think localizing is everything, and being critical and listening to your customer carefully is very crucial, especially when you're just starting.
Wissam, I want to get back to you again about the point that Hisham just made, and it is about the localization, think global, act local. Does that really impact your line of business and how you thought when you started thinking of global operations?
So for IQ, it's a local business. Yeah. Well, regional, you could say, now moving into Saudi, focused on system integration, hardware construction, and so forth. So that's one way of thinking. The other way is with Emma Systems, it is our first client was Hamad Airport, and I'll get into why later. I'm sure you're going to ask why Qatar is a good place to launch a global startup.
Yeah.
But from day one, our thinking was global, because you have, you have one airport in Qatar. So unless I want to grow, I have to think globally. And unfortunately, we did launch right before COVID, which wasn't great timing. But now, we have 4 airports, in Europe. We have about 70 more in the pipeline around the world, half of which are in Europe. Now, the difference is, going back to Hisham's point about localization, yes, each country has its own way of regulations, and even culturally from mentality. For us, it's, for example, the civil aviation. How do you adapt to that? And right now, as we enter the US market, for example, the way the US aviation industry works is very different than the rest of the world. They do things differently. The FAA and the airlines, control everything. They control the airport, even in the sense that they have, terminals. So as we enter here, actually, we have to rethink our product market fit. Hisham's cat is jumping in the way.
We have a cat who's an extra panelist. She wasn't accounted for, Hisham.
That's Juju.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome, Juju.
So what that means for us is you have to tweak your product, tweak your value proposition as well. So whereas in the rest of the world, we might be looking at airports in in US, we actually have to target more airlines. So what value do we add? So it's a slight nudge and shift in the right direction. There's no one product fits all. At the same time, how do you create, how do you remain product-based and not project-based? So you still want to have a replicable product that you take all over the world and not have a project by project element that prevents customization, support, and all that. So it's kind of a fine line that you have to walk.
Yeah. Diala, Hisham and Wissam brought up very important points about, the localization, talking about go-to-market strategy, talking about pivotal. And I love the way that Wissam also framed it, which is about being product focused rather than project focused. From your perspective, how are these elements all contributing to whether you're starting or growing into a global startup?
Whenever we talk about localization, I always remember and mention actually the successful campaigns that Kareem launched when they first started in Lebanon. I always highlight how really their understanding of the Lebanese culture in specific, how people wanted to actually pay, what language they speak in, how casual our conversation is, how we are multilingual, we speak 3 languages in one sentence. Them capturing all these elements of our specific culture in Lebanon helped them really take over the market that was dominated by Uber for months before. Uber was the first, I guess it was the first because it was really heavily used. However, when Kareem entered the market with their campaigns and with their own approach, they took a huge share of their own market, switched to them. I know that because I was one of the users who switched immediately from everything Uber to everything Kareem in Lebanon, and they stopped even using the application. So no matter how big your plan is to actually take over the region, which proved to be Kareem's vision later on, they tried to take each specific market they entered and to actually assess it from its own entry point. What are the triggers that will get a user to actually use it from a specific geography? And why would they ditch any other available solutions to just use the specific solution or platform altogether? And this proves the success of being super localized and trying to understand the specifics of the market, the culture, and the dynamics of the ecosystem itself that you're entering to. So this is always my favorite example. I was mentioning it even yesterday on one of our mentorship calls during this accelerator. I was saying I wish someone had a case study on this because this can be literally taught to new entrepreneurs entering new markets.
What about, and I'll start with you again, Diala, what about the entrepreneurial mindset and kind of their own personality and strategy? I don't want to exclude the entrepreneur, the visionary from the equation. How do you think that contribute? What's the importance of contribution to that, to the equation when it comes to talking about global startups?
Do you remember our first session in Thought Labs and the way
Yes.
I expressed myself? So yes. I define myself as a person with fluid culture, so to speak, in which I actually try to, whenever I meet someone from a different culture, I try to actually understand where they're coming from, what are the similarities between us, and what are the differences I should be careful about or I should navigate around. So the same thing actually applies for founders who are entering any new market. You should always keep an open mind of what's happening there. No matter how well you think you know a specific market or the people living in this market, you should take an extra step to actually learn that more by talking to them in the first place. You can't be an alien US company that's actually expanding to Qatar and believe you understand everything about the Islamic culture, the culture of the GCC, and the culture of this market in specific. So try to get closer as much as you can to your own customers in order to understand what they want from you and what are the solutions they want you to bring all together. So really, please, I beg you as founders to have an open mind, not to be stubborn. We all understand your passion towards your startup and your company. We all love and appreciate this. This is why you're part of different accelerators, incubators, and even investment rounds. But always be open to welcome new ideas, to explore new stuff, and to navigate things from a completely new perspective than what you're used to.
Wissam, do you believe the same thing, that the founder or the entrepreneur's personality and own mindset impacts whether they do become a global startup or not?
Yeah, for sure. So it depends what you want to do as an entrepreneur. Okay. If you don't want to go global, that's your choice. a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of pressure, a huge amount of expectations that are put on you, and lofty goals. A lot of people might be happy to go regional. I mean, Kareem went regional. They did pretty good for themselves. They knew what they wanted, and they went for it. Now, if you want to raise money from investors, investors don't want to hear, oh, I'm going to be the biggest in Qatar, or I'm going to be the biggest, in the northern part of the Gulf area, because investors bet, 1 out of 12 or whatever the figures are, that they'll get a $1 billion valuation. So you have to be aiming for the stars if you want to raise that sort of the capital, and you want to have that vision. That's what VCs are looking for. Now, unfortunately, entrepreneurs have a quite high suicide rate, just because there's a lot of pressure on them, and a lot of entrepreneurs tie their self-worth to their business. That's their only way they validate themselves, which of course is very unhealthy. And I talk a lot about that, to startups. But I say unfortunately also because a VC, an investor, wants someone that will die for their company and put everything in their company as well. So it's sort of this unhealthy, vicious cycle that perpetuates. So the long story short, you can have a regional business and be happy and wealthy, as well as the global one. You have just to look inside what you want to do and what drives you as an entrepreneur.
That's true. Hisham, what about the risk appetite of an entrepreneur? Do you think that is a main factor when it comes to building a global startup?
Well, in that aspect, I think building on what Wissam and Diala just mentioned earlier, I will give an example of what made us expand. For many different reasons, you may find yourself forced to do that. Wissam has highlighted the part where venture capital or investors are looking for entrepreneurs with big dreams, those who are building the next unicorn, those who can, achieve the 10 times X every year on their investments. Otherwise, they would have invested in stocks or whatever. And this creates a pressure on entrepreneurs in a way. However, other factors than the VCs also controls strategy or your expansion strategy. It might be political reasons, it might be geographical reasons, it might be user adoption, it might be certain constraints that you've seen in the current market that you operate in. So there are different attributes that actually affects your decision as an entrepreneur, whether you need to expand or you need to grow vertically where you are. As Wissam mentioned, that it's the entrepreneurs, preference at the beginning, if they want to be the biggest in Qatar, or they want to be a regional player or a big company. My story was all about focusing on value creation. And once we've reached to a point and understanding that we need to create greater value in order to, because at the end, your investors are part of your indirect customers or stakeholders at the end. So as much as you listen to your real users and customers, you also have a different type of customers expecting some sort of outcome by partnering with you. And finding this thin line between customers and investors, and your passion as an entrepreneur, and your understanding of the surroundings, your vision of the future, your vision of your industry, and how things should evolve. This is how you draw your roadmap, whether it is the time for you to expand or it's better to stand still and grow it vertically. For us, we started At Home Doc in Qatar in a very critical time, 2017. That was the blockade. And you can imagine a political situation that is a bit tricky, and then followed by a pandemic. We had a lockdown of 6 months, and then now we are facing some sort of a global recession, and people are recalculating the spendings on health benefits and other attributes of they might have called employee benefits or insurances. So everybody is looking into different challenges during the lifetime of your startup. Being nimble and robust and keeping an eye, as Diala mentioned, listen to your customers. I would add to that, you have to listen to different types of customers, not just the user. So you have users, you have investors, you have potential customers that didn't know that you exist, and you knew that they would actually be the perfect user of your services, and that's how you move on. Reflecting this to the investments part, it is sometimes mandatory for a company to grow and find the proper investments or funds, or attract the proper funds to the companies. They might have the need to exist in a bigger market or a bigger potential to have a better story when they're trying to sell it to their investors. But at the end, don't just do it because you're chasing funds. You do it when you see that it is necessary for your business to do it. That's it.
Thank you, Hisham. And you brought up something that's very important. I mean, as you said, between the external factors, I mean, you can have all the foundation and the mindset and the vision and all of this, but then you've got the external economic, political, and other factors coming into play here. So Diala, from that perspective, the impact of the external factors, Hisham started during a kind of a boycott, and then went into pandemic and everything else. And now we're talking about a global, possibly recession. How are these factors, and especially now that you're working with within the accelerator and the Tasmo accelerator that is looking for companies looking to expand globally, how are you seeing that impact?
Impact in terms on the operations of the startups, you mean?
On the operations, or on the, maybe even, is it about the agility that they always have to be agile, or is it about kind of pivoting all the time, or being very dynamic with your strategy and your go-to-market strategy specifically?
Exactly. The fun part and the fun actually and the sad part about an entrepreneur's life and the whole startup life cycle somehow is that you are always facing unexpected precedents in your life. There's always something new happening that you have zero control over. Either your team quitting because they wanted to, either you're having some internal turbulence inside the team dynamics, so having some external factors affecting you like COVID, recession, what have you. So no matter how much you try to navigate through these, no matter how good your strategy is, you will always be challenged by different factors coming your way. So as you mentioned, the key of actually going around all of these different hurdles, so to speak, are to actually be agile. I remember even when COVID first hit in Dubai, they were mentioning how many huge businesses were affected and how many huge businesses lost within the short period of the first month of the lockdown. And they tried to compare it to what was happening with SMEs and with startups. And they realized that the more agile and the smaller the company, the safer it was somehow to what was happening to because of COVID. Sure, the startups suffered a lot. They had a lot of losses. It really costed them a lot. However, their agility helped them to navigate through the challenges of these processes. They were shifting their business model from A to B, C to Z, testing around, because this is what we're used to as founders. You just keep on testing business models and figuring out which one is going to actually fly. So their agility and their willingness to actually navigate the market from a different angle helped them to navigate through these challenges altogether. The same thing applies now for the recession and for whatever the future might have to bring us. Dinosaurs 2.0, whatever it is, you should always be ready and agile. Hopefully, fingers crossed. You should always be ready to actually navigate through these challenges. And again, try to have an open mind, and nobody knows it all. So it is okay for you as a founder to seek the help of external stakeholders, to reach out to people you've never reached out to ask them for advice. You faced a similar issue back in the 90s. How did you navigate through it? Please guide us. We're desperate for that. Many people are willing to help you, especially that you are a founder. So just have an open mind and be like really try to approach different resources as much as you can, because this will make you get out of all of these, out of this turbulence somehow in a way stronger manner, hopefully, as much as possible.
Thank you, Diala. Wissam, actually going back full circle to how you started talking about, especially with Project Emma, and that was during the lockdown, and talking about aviation solutions and airports and all of this. Agility versus losing focus and becoming project focused rather than product focused. How did you maneuver through that?
So we had a project with IQ, had a project with Hamad Airport, and one of the issues they had was sharing of information. So they wanted to do like screen sharing to air traffic control, something very rudimentary. And I said, you know what? Why don't we just do? I'll build a platform for you, and we called it Emma. Now we deployed it, we developed it, and I had never focused on aviation before, so I didn't know anything about the sector. And I realized, my goodness, there's a lot of it's an archaic industry. There's a lot of opportunity here. So then, and this of course was a project. So now you want to go to market. I thought other airports would want it, but you need some development. You need some work to be done on it. Qatar is an expensive country. I'm going to take it outside of the US. And that's where I was approached by Qatar Foundation for the Product Development Fund, the PDF, which is, we were one of the first people to be awarded that. And that helped us develop it to make a replicable, product concept. The name itself, Product Development Fund, the whole idea is to work on R&D. Now, without government grants like this, it's difficult, for startups or innovation to really come up, especially for an industry like aviation, where the ROI, honestly, is quite low. It's a niche market. This is why it's, aerospace and defense has the lowest R&D of any industry, if you can believe it. So, in short, it was the support of the, of a government grant from Qatar Foundation that allowed us to move away from project and do, product. Now, why is product important? So right now we're actually looking at a company to acquire it. It's been around for a long time, and in the aviation space. And in our due diligence, we realized that, they have many airports around the world, but each one is almost project based. So an airport wants, and then they have a solution and they modify it a bit, you customize it, not configure it, customize it. So customize, you're changing the code, you're opening the hood, configure it, you're just, turning the knob.
The adjustments on the outside.
Exactly. So the fact that it's project, you can tell it's project by project, that lowered their value for us a lot of what they're worth. Instead of looking at sort of an ARR multiple, so top line multiple, you're looking at EBITDA multiple. So it drastically decreased it. And that's the importance of doing, a product versus a project sort of based solution.
Thank you, Sam. I can't wrap up, of course, before we go to any questions. So please, if you've got any questions for the attendees, please put them in the Q&A tab. The basic question, the fundamental one we started with, which is, how did you build up a global startup from Qatar? And more importantly, what is it about? Again, we all know by numbers, the Qatar market is a small market, but that in itself could be a huge advantage because, you have the prototype and you're testing and you're making sure that you are solid and you've got a solid foundation in your home market before moving out to other countries. So Hisham, how did you build a global startup from Qatar? And what was part of the infrastructure, the ecosystem elements that supported your growth to this point in time?
On many occasions, I've mentioned that we are quite fortunate to have started from Qatar. Basically, I've been in Qatar for quite some time before I think of starting my own business and dumping all my savings and chasing this crazy idea and realizing, that it's not enough. I need to attract more funds to this company. like I've learned a whole new thing that I knew nothing about before I start my business, which is the need of that the growth needs skills, and you have to learn how it works. I've never joined a founders institute or an incubation until I've started the company and conducted perhaps 500 or 600 consultations, and then we realized that this is not enough. We need guidance, we need mentorship, and that's when we approached. At that time was Cubic, and even before Cubic, Qatar Foundation, the Qatar Science and Technology Park, has had this partnership with 500 startups. So we were able to apply for one of the venture funds program, the Falcons, the 500 Falcons. We got selected amongst 12 other companies. We've been sent to Kuwait for about 4 weeks. That was during the blockade. And that's when we started learning about how startup works, that growth is a process, exactly like sales. As a CEO, you start figuring out that you have a job description, building products, selling the product, and selling shares of your companies as part of the job description. So, and on average, Wissam is coming from San Francisco. We've been told, I've never been to San Francisco yet, but I've been told that an average startup founder meets about 3 investors every day to maintain their financial capabilities and funding the company according to their growth rates and so on, which is extremely challenging in the Middle East to find this number of investors on a daily basis. I would say that Wissam probably would find 100 investors right in the Starbucks around the corner, perhaps. But here it's quite challenging, and learning again about how the mindset of the investors in the Middle East work rather than investors in the Silicon Valley. That might be completely different. Investors in tech extensive environments like the Silicon Valley would be more savvy towards the future and the value this technology will create, rather than investors might be here looking at unit economics and seeing how you're monetizing today, not tomorrow. So between this and that, we started learning that it's not only about your customers, it's about understanding a lot about the business and how it works and how you should grow your key performance indicators, and you should have the one metric that matters, and you should chase it, and you should track it, and you should present it, and you should sell it. And that's where we started learning that we've got to keep this momentum going with our clients, with our investors. And luckily in Qatar, it has it all, because it's not geographically large. However, there are different options in the ecosystem, different incubators, programs, passionate people about change, investors, funds. Everything is there. So it's all about the founder themselves. If they know how to use those tools given to them or not. So it depends on you. At the end, it's not something that I'm going to give you a recipe that you follow, and if you do it, you probably raise funds or succeed. It doesn't work this way. So at the end, you have dots, and there are so many dots in Qatar, and it's your duty to connect them, and that's it.
I like that.
Yeah.
Wissam, did you crack the code on how to connect the dots in Qatar to become a global startup?
So I'm a big proponent, supporter of Qatar as a launching pad. Now, I've been focused on B2B, and Qatar is a great place to start for that, because you have flagship clients in the country that are world renowned that you can leverage for credibility around the world. It's difficult for me coming from Qatar. If I was to start an e-commerce company and I go to the US, I say, listen, I'm from Qatar. They'll laugh at me. They'll say, we have Amazon. Or doing fintech from here and going to Europe, and they'll say, well, UK is like the leader in fintech. But aviation for us is different. Aviation, though, if I was doing a startup before, when I've launched other things from Qatar to try and go global, I would have to hide the fact that I'm in Qatar. You know how you have those like Indian, outsourcing development shops, which they say they have an address in New Delhi and an address in New Jersey, just to show that they're like an American front. I would sort of have to, do the almost similar, like hide the fact that I'm in Qatar. But the fact with aviation that I'm in Qatar, and we have Hamad as one of our first deployments, and in our region, we have the most advanced airports, the newest airports from UAE to Oman to Saudi that are being developed, and new airports coming out in Kuwait, that the world looks at us as subject matter experts. They look at us for advice and how do we move best of breed. So we leverage that as well, and it's critical for us. And what supports us now is we're based in Qatar. Okay, the company is incorporated in the US for legal reasons, but we also have a subsidiary, here in the free zone. And the fact that we are in Qatar is a big advantage. So again, this is I'm focused on B2B, but you have across all industries. If you were to go to hospitality, you have Qatar Hospitality here, which is 60 hotels around the world. If you were to go into health or insurance, you have the leading, the largest insurance. If you were to go into banking, you have QNB. If you were to go to oil and gas, you have Qatar Energy. So there's a lot that you can leverage here that you can springboard. And the ecosystem of startups here has developed a lot, like Hisham said. I mean, we get a lot of support now here. We're lucky enough to be part of the TASMU program as well, which helps us connect, with local, like we're in Hamad, but I can't get to Qatar Airways. Well, now, thanks to Diala, she connected us with Qatar Airways as the next step. So there's a lot that can be leveraged out of Qatar as well. And of course, with the recognition that we got from FIFA, it really put us on the map about what we're doing. Everybody knows where we are. And fundraising here, it's also difficult. Yeah, okay, I was at Starbucks and there were 6 investors wanting to give me money. I said no to all of them. It's not that easy here as well, but
lost a good deal of investors
might as well
there.
Consider SpaceX and Blue Origin. Why not Emma for the first space station? I mean,
yeah, exactly. So, but Hisham is absolutely right about the mindset here. It's just the way the thinking happens here. It's differently. It's really the mindset is here. How can I change the world? And this is how we're going to do it. Not how can I open, as I was joking before, 10 coffee shops, boutiques. It's a completely different mindset. And there is, if you have a good idea, you have a good team, there's money available. When we talk about seed round, I mean, I was just talking to a guy. He started his company, his seed investment. Hisham, don't fall off your chair. His seed didn't even anything. His seed was $10 million. Okay.
Okay.
So here we're lucky if we get.
I've been in one of those discussions before. I was proudly asking for 5 million, and then the guy was about to tell me 5 million for what? Is it a Series A? Are you serious? You're wasting my time for $5 million. So I've been there once, yeah.
So it's a different mindset, but back to your original point, Hanan, they will give you 10 million if you have a global mindset. I mean, what this guy is doing, it's, Kafka as a service in the cloud, which is really cool. I mean, the sky's the limit for what he's doing. He's the first one doing it. So, that's the mindset. What's your total addressable market? How much is it worth? If they think you can do it, and there's a huge upside, because look at it from an investor standpoint. Let's say an investor has $1 million. Okay, that investor, she can take the $1 million, put it in the stock market, and over 20 years, maybe she'll have $2.5 million. Okay, if it's constantly growing. But let's say you want a tiny amount, $100,000. Okay, of that million, give me 100,000. Keep that 900,000 in the stock market. In 2 years, if you're having 2.5 million, you have 2.3 million. And then that 100,000, put it in a startup. In 20 years, that 100,000 might be worth 100 million, or worst case, it'll be zero. At the end of the 20 years, you've only lost, a tiny amount of money compared to your overall. And that's how the mindset is, is here about diversifying and looking at the risk. It's very, very different.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Diala, Hisham and Wissam brought a very important and valid points again about the attractiveness of starting a global startup from Qatar. That involves, the available resources. We're talking different accelerators, different incubator programs, whether we're talking Qatar Development Bank, Qatar Business Incubation Center, TASMO, and the Ministry in general, the Incubation Center. We've got QSTP, we have Founder Institute, of course, and everything related to it. But we're also talking about investment. Is it then valid to say that this all depends, going back to the original idea, whether we are talking a B2B or a B2C, the innovation part, what for you brings it all together of the kind of the appeal of why and how to start a global startup from Qatar?
And when you talk about any startup ecosystem and having that startup ecosystem as your launchpad, you should consider your business as a first starting point. So the business model itself, the market it's trying to address, the different stakeholders it wants to go after, really defines which one, especially regionally, might make more sense for you to actually start from. You know how competitive the ecosystems are in Saudi and in UAE. However, they're not also for everybody. Whatever is being publicized, I used to work in both heavily, whatever is being publicized that they're offering founders everything they might think of, abundance of investment opportunities, of talents from all around the world, of incubation, grants, whatever, they are available in abundance, but there are a lot of terms and conditions to get them. And even for you to set up a successful company in these countries, it's going to take you a lot. It's not an easy process legally. It's not an easy process financially. It's not an easy process operationally at all. So the different ecosystems, they have their own specifics. They have definitely their own attractive points, and they're really valid, value proposition somehow, or competitive advantage compared to other ecosystems. However, it always goes back to the startup itself and to the founder himself, what they are launching and which geography makes more sense for them. So you can't tell me, for example, you want to launch a B2G platform from Lebanon, let's say. It's a failing country. It will not actually fly there. Sorry, Wissam, I'm Lebanese too. But if you tell me you're going to launch
it's in distress.
from
Let's not say failing.
Yes.
It's in distress.
Just a little bit of ranting here and there about the economy in the country. But if you want to start such a platform, it makes so much sense for you to actually do it from one of the leading GCC countries. And Qatar, from a B2G point of view, is actually one of the really prominent players in this space. So it really goes back to the startup itself. What are they trying to build? What are they going to actually bring as propositions, and for them to assess accordingly. But as you mentioned, I really hate it when people tell you that Qatar doesn't have anything, from tourism to different attractions, different stuff, also stuff in the startup ecosystem. For me, if you look deeper and if you try to research what's happening here, you will find that there are tens and hundreds of opportunities being launched, from the university level to the government level. So you have a lot of stuff happening around. Just be curious enough to learn more about it and to even knock on doors asking, what do you have to offer me as an entrepreneur? So this is actually what I always keep on telling my founders about.
Thank you so much, Diala. Thank you for this very enriching conversation. We have a question here from Muhammad Shaheen. Hi, Muhammad. So he's asked, are there any specific sectors or startups focused that are more likely to globally expand? And let me add, from Qatar. And I think, Wissam, you touched on that a bit, talking about B2B rather than B2C, just because of the database of the numbers in Qatar?
No, that was, no, I just, from my experience. So I just want to talk from B2B. I don't know the B2C space. I think Hisham can talk maybe close to that.
Yeah.
You're muted.
You're muted, Hisham.
Sorry, the question was about the market again. What was the question?
Are there specific sectors or startups focused that are more likely to globally expand? And I was adding the part from Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very broad question. And the answer to it, I think, would be depending on which industry, the vertical, the potential. I would say, if we talk generally speaking, bioengineering, AI, seems to have the highest potential for a sustainable growth in the long term or in the future. Not sure about other industries, and I'm not sure even if it is suitable to say that out of Qatar, or because those are more of an R&D startups. If you're building AI models, or if you're building biotechnology, it doesn't matter where you are. In fact, while what matters is actually the value you're creating with the technology that you are creating. And talking about myself for the industry that we're focused on, we believe that there is a regional and a global increase on what we do and the future of what we're doing, where we did not say what exactly we're doing. I think also Wissam did not mention about Emma Systems, what exactly is the value proposition of the company. We're in the virtual and in-person healthcare. Our scope is the primary healthcare. So a lot of investments have been poured in the secondary and tertiary care. Very investments specifically in the private sector has been directed to primary care, and that's our niche market, and we're focused on that part. We think that this plays a crucial role in cost containment and delivering high quality services and improving healthcare outcomes. People's healthcare is a basic need. So at the end, everybody's going to need healthcare, whether it is now or in the future. The way it is provided, if the use of AI, definitely AI is impacting the industry, specifically in certain areas. Radiology, for example, the accuracy of artificial intelligence has exceeded the human accuracy big time. Yep. But you cannot generalize that I would allow a robot to do a surgery or remove a tumor from a patient, or it might happen in the future. And I personally believe that with the new technologies being evolved in machine learning and AI, with the Neuralink and connecting chips with human brains and reading signals and improving certain functionalities related to how the brain works, I would say that we're on the verge of a new era that might arise soon, which is the use of machine learning that would make the current human as a superhuman. So I would say it's not that the machine learning is going to take over, but I would say that we as human are going to have hundreds and hundreds times more information that would allow us to make a much better decision, or even grow our companies or grow our economies, or find solutions for problems that we didn't know they exist. So I would say that the future is technically in machine learning, I would say in the biotechnology, and that's something that I am personally interested at.
Thank you, Hisham. The second part of Muhammad's question, and Diala, this is to you more, and I think this follows up on what Hisham is saying. Can we say that it is easier for a company that is tech-based or tech-enabled to expand globally versus that is product-based?
Usually it is actually advised as such, but honestly, from a practical experience, I guess both Hisham and Wissam can actually best advise on this. But yes, it's usually well communicated in the ecosystem that if you have a software company, it's easier for you to take it across borders, given the technological feasibility of doing that compared to actually having to endure all the transportation and logistics issues pertaining to transporting products from one geography to the other. And also the different permits you would need to actually get, access to the country, what have you. But I guess Hisham and Wissam can have better.
Yeah, Wissam, do you have insights?
I love how the names they rhyme, Wissam and Hisham.
Yeah.
I think so, if you're looking at it from, you're putting your skin in the game, or as an investor, you want to validate or prove a concept as cheap as possible, as fast as possible. There's thousands of social media apps out there You got to put a little bit of money in a few of them and see which takes off. It's very easy to validate takes off. If I was to go into manufacturing, even though it could be a big market, there's a certain amount of investment that has to be done. Now, of course, there's tricks you can do, like creating an online store with your product and see how many clicks you get. And you say, look, of course, you don't have any stock, but you can then go invest and say, look, I got 1,000 requests. Let's invest. But if you look at the richest person in the world, I mean, he's selling handbags, you know? I mean, Bernard Arnault in LVMH, he's the richest man in the world. And he's selling, you know, purses and champagne and stuff. So there's no reason, you know, where okay, it's not a granted, it's not a startup. He has many brands. But there's no reason why you should just focus on software because investors want to follow the easiest track. You know, the joke is like in the US, the $1 trillion valuation companies or $500 billion are changing the world, and in Europe, the $1 trillion companies are selling handbags. So there's no reason why you shouldn't. It's just the barriers to entry and to validate is just more expensive. And as Diala said, there's just more risks involved. If you make a mistake with a small, you know, with a social media app, how much you're going to lose? A few thousand, $50,000, you know, dollars in development fees. But if you make a mistake on, you know, $1 million order of whatever new idea, and there's a malfunction, and then you have to send it back and repair it, and all the overheads related with that, there's much more cost associated with that.
Let me just wrap up. I know this is top of the hour, so just one last question we had from Shadi, and Wissam and Hisham, I'd love for your input. He says, what if during your validation, the product market fit phase, you found that the business model is not geared well in the local market? While if you validate in another market, it could boom. How do you address this challenge? Which I think, Hisham, you have addressed it with the localization. And Wissam, we're talking about how much do you amend and go under the hood versus giving what's there. So just your quick thoughts on that.
Okay. It's a good question. If I would say that I'm starting a new company or a new idea in a new market, you usually start with a market study and then you put in a business strategy, how you're going to approach this market. But I would say the biggest challenge is the use of network. This is something that is undermined. Having just giving a thought that this market might be the potential market for you is not enough, because there is unseen barriers might prevent you from even testing your product in that potential market. So the use of network and establishing a network would be one of the biggest challenges for any entrepreneur that is wanting to penetrate a new market or starting testing a new product or a new technology with users in a certain market. For us, when we went to Egypt, we went with a perspective, the same perspective of what we've done in Qatar, and we were targeting medium, high net worth individuals, focusing on business to consumer, go-to market strategy. And then we found out that we've been called in different areas. The country is so big, you could drive for 3 hours east to west, and that is extremely inefficient. And meanwhile, you spread yourself too thin. It jeopardizes your quality, your service level, a lot of attributes. So we navigated that. We want to shift the strategy from being a business to consumer into a business to business, as what Wissam is doing in his business model, for example. So we found out that this shift would work best in Egypt, and that's how we contained our cost, we controlled our quality, because we didn't have much fund to spend on a market like Egypt. Egypt is huge, and if we spend here like $5 million on during the last 5 years, or you would need to spend $20 million there to establish a proper network, a marketing and media plan, and an expansion plan in a big market. And again, the unit economics and the economical, the purchasing power and the competition, a lot of attributes are there. So end of the question, just the bottom line of this question, to answer
which
your
is exactly
question,
what you
just
addressed, yeah.
run. Like you just close and switch. If you're certain that it does not work here and it will work there, just go and test. Don't wait. So you have to test it.
I think that is it. Yeah, Wissam, it's about testing, but again, just how much do you test and how much do you amend?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, if I was like in the US selling a great, you know, I have an app that's like Christian Bible dating app, I can tell you it's not going to work well in Qatar. So I'll just forget that market. There's no tweaking I can do. I'm going to enter the market. But what I can do is I can look what's working in the region and potentially do an acquisition to capture market share. Now, when you're very early on, it's difficult to do. But this is where it comes in, the entrepreneur comes in, doing structuring deals, do a stock swap, negotiating, do a merger. That's where the creativity comes in. Now, but if you have a good product that's, minor tweaking, as Hisham said, across each country, to fit culturally or the buying habits, the bigger hurdle that you're going to face will probably be government regulation. So how is, Uber is a good example. Every country, they have a whole slew of, unions they got to deal with, government saying no, so they have to tweak the way it interacts with each country. And that's even for us, that's the bigger headache to deal with. But again, if it's a huge culturally, different, the product won't work, you just have to, think of another way, forget that market, or do an acquisition.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the valuable insights you've shared today. And I love that a lot of them were kind of practical on ground. We've done this. This is what happened. And this is how we overcame it. So Wissam Kostandi, Diala Dawood, Hisham and Fishawi, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you for everyone who attended. Again, we're kicking off our cohort in Founder Institute Qatar, October 4th. For more information, please check out fi.co/apply/Qatar. For those that want to stick around for another 10, 15 minutes for some networking, please raise your hand and I'll bring you on stage. But our panelists, thank you so much for being here. If you'd like to stick around and you have some time, please do. Other than that, we understand your limitations. But once again, this has been such an enriching conversation. Thank you to Katie, my beautiful colleague, for being the producer for tonight and for managing the chat. So once again, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, but we hope to see you in future events. And of course, looking forward to more conversations with you, Wissam, Diala, and Hisham. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. There's one more question from Khalid here.